Record. So we should be actually on chapter 6 now. But last time when we spoke, I I mentioned that there is another sort of way of looking at Vedanta, and I didn't go into it at that time because it's a little philosophical, which I wanted to kind of introduce to you, just a different way of, this is not the way normally when you listen to all the Swamis and all, they won't describe it in this way. But this is kind of a more, shall we say, scientific or logical approach or philosophical approach for looking at Vedanta. And I just wanted to introduce it to you guys. So you may find it too dry, in which case, just forget about it, But if you find it useful, then it might be nice. And I want to do it before you guys are completely falling asleep. Okay, while you're still relatively fresh. Now, this is going to put you to sleep. Okay, is that okay? Okay, perfect. So, I want to share, like, philosophically speaking, like, big picture. If you think about it, and I may have mentioned this before, there are two sort of buckets of philosophy, big ones. One bucket says that this world is essentially matter. And matter somehow rearranges itself to create consciousness. So, you start with, let's say, if you look at the Big Bang thing, you start with elementary particles. And then after some time, as the universe cools down a little bit, those particles start to coalesce and combine. And forces emerge, and slightly more complicated particles emerge. And then suddenly you have hydrogen atoms. And then you have, as it starts getting cooler and cooler, you have hydrogen molecule, and then you have hydrogen, turning to helium with release of energy, and slowly, and then when the stars burst, then you have all these complex chemical elements. So, over time, the complexity of the elements increases, they combine in different ways. And somewhere when the conditions are right, we don't know how, but somehow some molecules combine together in such a way that life is created or consciousness is created. Initially, it might be some sort of a germ or some sort of a single cell organism living in some damp water, water. And then it becomes more complex, it goes to land, and slowly we evolve. I mean, that's how science looks at things, that's how we've learned things. And that's based on an underlying philosophy, which is called materialism, which is the essential elements. What is really there is matter. And this, what we call consciousness, emerges out of matter. And we take this to be true because we can see matter around us. And, that's the best we can do right now. We can't deny the existence of matter. But there's another philosophy, which is the opposite, which says that all there is consciousness. And what we call matter emerges out of consciousness. So that's sort of the spiritual aspect. It's completely 180 degrees away from the philosophy that I earlier mentioned of matter turning to consciousness. And why am I bringing this to you? I'm bringing this to you because that other philosophy is what Vedanta is. So what Vedanta says is actually fundamentally different from what we have come to learn and be educated on. And we may not realize this difference because we don't think about it like this. We just think about, what we've heard in the Upanishads, and we are talking about it. But if you look deeper into it, this is what Vedanta is saying. Essentially, what Vedanta is saying is there is a Sat. Just one Sat, Satchitananda, Brahman. And that Brahman is consciousness. It's not inert, it's conscious. So consciousness does not emerge from anything. It doesn't emerge from a combination of matter or something like that. It is a priori. It's there. It's all that is there. Everything else emerges from that consciousness, if emerges is the right word. But what is actually there is consciousness, as opposed to what science is saying. What is there is matter. Now they're trying to find out what that fundamental matter is, which is that single thing from which all matter emerges. But whether they find it or not, and when they find it, that's what they say. Actually, that's what they're looking for. That piece of matter from which everything emerges, including life. So these are the two fundamental philosophies. Now there is a third philosophy, which also I should introduce. That's called Sankhya. Sankhya philosophy says both are fundamental. That there is a Prakriti, which is matter. Matter and energy is the same thing. That, by the way, our Indian philosophies recognized long ago that there is no difference between matter and energy. Energy and matter is the same thing. So Sankhya says the same thing. There's something called Prakriti, which is the fundamental, undivisible, existent, unmanifest matter. And then there is something called Purusha, which is the fundamental existent consciousness. And when the two combine, then you have this creation. So there is matter, there is consciousness. So it's a philosophy of duality. There are two different things. It's not a philosophy of single one thing. Science is the philosophy of a single one thing. Actually, we haven't found that single one thing, but we truly believe, scientists believe that there is that one thing, and we are trying to look for that one thing with the theory of everything, which explains everything. Vedanta is also a philosophy of one thing, but that one thing is consciousness, not matter. Okay. So now,
so if I ask, not part of Vedanta.
Huh?
So this duality thing is not sponsored by Vedanta.
No, Vedanta is singularity, consciousness. The only existing thing is Brahman. That's why Brahman is Satyam. Everything else is Mithya. It emerges from Brahman. And how it emerges is also very unique. It doesn't emerge as real, as like, matter emerges from matter. It seemed to emerge. It seems to emerge. So that's a further exploration. But Vedanta says there is only one reality, and that is Brahman. And that's consciousness. So any effort to try and find out how life came from combination of matter is futile according to Vedanta.
No, actually, Nitu, Vedanta can also cover that, right? Vedanta can accept all of science. And Vedanta can say at some point there was enough complexity. So, from the origin of universe, there was enough complexity that consciousness could reflect itself in that. Not that consciousness emerges from it, but that consciousness could reflect in that enough that the conditions were right for consciousness.
For that you have to say that matter exists from which that is not Vedanta.
No, I'm saying that Vedanta can cover that entire evolution of the world and say, right, that it's okay. Yeah, maybe that is how it happened. Doesn't deny.
Vedanta does cover the evolution of the world.
Yeah,
it does. But the difference is that it says that what we think is the cause and effect and how the world evolves. The approach to it is a little different. So what you're saying is right, because everything is part of Brahman. So all this that you're describing, the evolution and, starting from there and becoming more complex and all of that is all part of Brahman.
Yes, also the difference is that you said that consciousness is created out of complexity. I am saying that Vedanta can also explain it by saying that enough complexity created enough conditions for consciousness to be reflected, pre-existent consciousness to be reflected, not that it was
no. I'll have to explain this. What I'm trying to say is that doesn't sound right.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Let's just go ahead. Okay. It's okay.
Yeah, we'll get into that later. It doesn't sound right because you're giving equal status to all these things, to the consciousness and consciousness being reflected. They are not equal status. Consciousness is Satyam, everything else is Mithya.
No, yeah.
right? So, okay, anyway,
Anyway.
maybe I'm not
But
understanding
this-
what you're saying.
But
Huh?
this raised a slightly different, maybe related, but different question in my head, which was that if we say that everything is Brahman, which, and really we underscore everything, that in itself tells you that it even accommodates misunderstandings. It accommodates my lack of
Absolutely. So,
knowledge.
see, there are two different levels of reality. When you say misunderstanding, understanding, blah, 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 all these things, they're all mithya. They're all vyavharika. Brahman is paramarthika. So you can say whatever you want on the mithya plane. It has no effect on Brahman. Anything you say, knowledge, ignorance, lack of knowledge, all of that,
Wrong knowledge, fake knowledge.
wrong knowledge, fake knowledge, it's all underlies Brahman. It's nothing but a vritti in Brahman. It can't exist if it wasn't underlying, if Brahman wasn't underlying it. Its existence comes from Brahman. And actually, that's what I'm going to take you through now. Okay? So I'm going to take you through in a very detailed way what all this actually means, because we've been using these words for a long time, mithya, satyam, and I want to take you through an example. Okay? And it is complicated, so that is why I don't want to wait too long, because I know you're all going to get tired pretty soon. So, I want you to do a thought experiment with me. Okay? You think about it like this. Let's assume that because actually the choice we have to make really is whether the materialistic philosophy is right or the spiritual philosophy is right. Which of these two is okay? Because they can't both coexist. So let's assume for a minute that the materialistic way of thinking is right. So let's assume for a minute that there is a world out there. It actually exists. And what we as human beings are doing is we have been created somehow by increasing complexity, and we are actually seeing the world, we are observing the world around us. So let's go through that process of observation, because that's what Vedanta tells you to do. Vedanta is a philosophy which is based on experience, the actual experience. Okay, so let's assume that we are trying to look at an object out there. So how do we look? And let's just take the senses, the eyes. It's just one particular small thing we're going to take, and that can be expanded to everything else. So if there is an object out there, let's say any object in front of you, and how do we know we see it? We know that that object, light reflects from that object, and photons of light carry different energies depending upon the color and the shape of the color of the object. So those photons of light hit our retina, right? Our retina is nothing but nerve cells. That's what they are. Nerve cells have the capacity they have charges. So when something hits our nerve cells, then electric charge goes along the nerve. So there's a pulse of electric charge which is generated, which starts from one end of the nerve and goes to the other end of the nerve. And on the other end of the nerve, there'll be another nerve, and so on. But eventually it lands in our visual cortex, which is the part of the brain which sees, right? And we don't know what happens after that. But somehow from there, something happens and the object is seen. So what really happens when something is seen is a stimulation of the electrical field in our visual cortex. That's what seen means, right? So it doesn't mean that you're seeing it. If I make that same stimulation through another means, if I understood the pattern of it and made it in another means, I will see the same thing. I will not be able to make out any difference. So exactly what is happening? Let's assume for a minute, that we are a neuron. We are a neuron in the retina. Okay. Think about it. You're a neuron in the retina. All you are is electrical charges because of, ions and everything in there. Now, there's a tree out there, and a photon from the tree comes and hits you, your neuron, your retina. When the photon from the tree hits the retina, you sense it. Because you're a neuron, you can sense it. You're sensitive to photons. Now tell me, what exactly are you sensing? Are you sensing the photon which hit you? Or are you sensing changes in electrical field, in your electrical field, which are caused by the hit of the photon? What are you sensing?
Changes in the electrical field.
Right? Any doubts about that? Sanjay, so to nahi kya?
नहीं
हाँ.
I am okay till now.
You understand so far?
हाँ
This is important to understand because what I'm trying
हाँ
to tell you is all the retina can do is sense changes in itself. Retina cannot do anything else. It can only, for a retina, the only thing that really exists is itself. The only thing that it can sense is a change in itself. Everything else is assumed. Retina would assume that because this change happened and it happened in this pattern, it must be a photon that hit me. In fact, this assumption has become so intrinsic that the retina wouldn't even think about it. Like it'll just be automatic. And why? Because it knows that a pattern like this means a photon. A pattern like something else might mean another particle. But what it is really sensing is a change in itself. If you ask retina, what does it really know? What does it really experience? It can only experience itself, and it can experience a change in itself. So for the retina, the experience of a photon is nothing but a vritti. It's called a vritti. A change in yourself is called a vritti. And what is the vritti in the retina itself? So what is happening in the experience? There is a substance, which is the underlying retina substance. And there's a vritti in that retina substance. Vedanta calls the substance satyam and calls the vritti mithya. It's just it's a term. So when experience, so now let's, so we know now retina senses only a change in itself. Anything that it senses is a vritti. We call it a vritti. Depending on the shape of the vritti, it can tell whether a proton hit me or a photon hit me or something else hit me, right? The substance of the neuron, of the retina neuron is called satyam, because that's what it knows it exists. It only knows that exists. So that's why it's satyam. The rest, which it infers as a vritti, is called mithya, because that's an inference. Okay? So now let's take, so far so good?
Yeah.
Okay, so now let's take this and take it to the next experience. So we just saw this about the retina. Now the same thing is happening when impulses from the retina hit our brain. Now instead of the photon hitting the back of the head, it's electrical charges which are hitting the back of the head. So it's an electron which is hitting the back of the head, not a photon, right? Because electrical charges are carried by electrons. And let's assume that there is some self to which is it hitting. Now this is where the leap comes in. We don't know what this self is. We don't know whether this self is matter, not matter, what is it? We have no idea. But we know that this self is experiencing something. The only thing a self can experience is a change in itself, just like the retina. The only thing that self really knows exists is itself. Everything else, this whole world which the self experiences, is nothing but a vritti, a change in itself. Self knows it exists. That's the substance. It's called satyam. Everything else in this world is a vritti which the self has felt. It's called mithya. The self assumes that everything else actually exists because it understands patterns. When a certain pattern of impulses of vritti, certain kind of vritti happens, I know that this means this person. When I see Atul's face, there's a pattern to a vritti which Atul's face causes. In my memory bank, I have multiple patterns stored. When that pattern of Atul's vritti happens, it quickly looks at all the different vrittis. It's a computer, like a computer. It recognizes, oh, this is similar to an Atul pattern, makes the connection, and cognizes that this is Atul. Sometimes I can make a mistake also, because maybe Atul, there's a very small difference, and I don't recognize it because I falsely correlate Atul's twin with Atul because they look very similar. But I'm just saying, Vedanta says this is the nature of experience. Vedanta defines experience as a vritti in yourself. And because everything that you know is a vritti, you don't have direct evidence that they exist. You just assume that they exist because because you're saying this is a vritti, somebody else is saying the same thing. There's inter-subject agreement. Everybody is, if something moves, not just I think it moves, you also would agree that it moves. We are all, and all our senses also agree. So there is so much evidence that we never even think about it. We just assume everything out there exists. Although there's another explanation for that, but that's a different issue. What I'm trying to say is, this is how Vedanta defines experience. This is what mithya means. This is what satyam means. Satyam means that which I know is there. Myself. I know myself is there. There is just I have no doubt about it. I don't need anybody to tell me that. I don't need my senses to tell me. I can close my eyes, shut my ears. I still know I'm there. Everything else is a vritti.
So Nitu, this is essentially the same. So even if you remove Vedanta from the picture, just like common sense, all I really know is what's in my consciousness. I don't know anything else. Like the whole world, all of this is just, everything I know is just what is in my consciousness. It's kind of another way of saying that, right?
Yeah, the only difference is that you don't want to, this is where Vedanta will help you, because you can be mistaken. You're saying, I as an individual exist, Kiki, and I have a separate consciousness and I know everything around me. What Vedanta is saying is, that is not really true. That's solipsism. It's saying even you as a separate consciousness is in that supreme consciousness.
Yes.
And that supreme consciousness exists in which you also exist. So when you go one step further back to that Brahman, then what you're saying is right. And that's why this kind of thinking, first of all, should be done with a guru, because it can really mess you up. and it has to be done properly, and it has to be done with maturity. But I'm just the reason I shared this to you is because there is an underlying truth or underlying reasoning behind Vedanta, which we must, if you're really going to do mananam, if you really want to understand like all these words, such everything is based on myself, you have two options. You can either say, okay, Gita said it, or Upanishad said it, so it must be true. Or you can say, because Upanishad said me, let me think about it. And you should, I would encourage you to think about it and see, and like, what does it really mean that all there is the self, all there is Brahman? And when you want to, this kind of stuff is available in Vedanta to help you, to guide you, think through all this and, gain conviction. Now, the problem is we don't really know how from this, let's say you can say this consciousness exists. From where did the vrittis come? Does the vritti actually, when the vritti happens, does it actually change Brahman? Because Brahman has no parts. Brahman is non-dual. So how can a vritti happen in something which is non-dual? For a vritti or a change to happen, the thing should have a shape. Then when the waveform comes or a change happens, the shape should be different. All that is not happening in Brahman. So this vritti is not actually happening in Brahman. We don't know the mechanism for how this happens. The only correlation we have is with dream, which is when we are dreaming, we feel like the world around us, everything, but there's no real world. So anyway, that's all. I mean, there's a lot more to unpack here, but I just wanted to introduce the topic to you guys. Okay, that it's not just all words where people have just said words and told you believe it because I said so. It's not like that. It's a pretty deep philosophy. Okay, that's all I wanted to say about this for now. So Sanjay and Mukta and Atul and Kiki though are in the, they are up. You guys are almost asleep. This is a good video to listen to, Mukta, if you don't feel sleepy. Mukta, you're trying to say something?
No, I'm not sleepy. That's okay. That's all right.
Okay, so what do we want to talk about now next? Do you have any questions, or shall we go to chapter 6?
So I actually have a comment, which is, Nitu, that you had asked me last week, what is the stumbling block, right, for me?
Mhm.
And I think that the view and vision of Vedanta from regular ordinary life is so diametrically opposite that it is almost like, if I were to, it is so hugely different, completely opposite, that is almost like, you have to just die and reborn right in this instant in order to have your eye land on your consciousness instead, like it is.
I think that's the stumbling block. You don't have to do anything for your eye to land in your consciousness. It's already there.
I know.
There's no other way that so that's what I'm trying to say. What is it that is preventing us from sort of accepting this fact? That's the question. Like, why are we thinking that one day we'll have enough capability and then we will realize this? So I know there are a lot of good reasons for it. Vedanta has a whole process for it. It's called Nididhyasana and all that. But you don't have to go into all that. You just now look into your own personal self and see what's stopping you. Forget about everything else. Forget about what's in the texts and all that. But just see what's stopping you. I can tell you, it has to be with the ego. It has to do with the ego.
That's why I said it's like dying right now and then being reborn, because it is a complete attachment to what I think is Kiki, to what I think I am.
No, you don't have to die and be reborn. Nothing is needed. That's my. You have equal right to express how you feel and what you're saying. I am just telling you my feeling that nothing is different. Nothing is to be changed. We don't have to become better human beings or anything or any of those things.
I'm not saying any of that. And when I said die and reborn, I didn't mean any of that stuff. I just meant one's concept of oneself.
Okay.
Okay.
It's not even that, like, maybe where I was, it's not even that your sense of Kiki will go away. It's not even that your sense of ego will go away. See, because that's also we hear a lot about, that the ego will vanish. Ego cannot vanish. If the ego vanishes, you will cease to exist.
Yeah.
All that happens is that you know that the ego is mithya. That's all. What that ego, which was so real for you, that was like, without that ego, you don't exist. That feeling goes away. That's all. It's nothing, but the ego will remain. Kiki as a separate individual will remain. Kiki with her needs and desires and everything else will remain. And all of that is, and don't even fight it, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Don't even try to change it. Like, lead your life.
Yes. No, I get it.
Okay, that's what I was trying to say. That just all you need to know is that it is mithya. That this is not exist. Nothing of here is existential. That's all.
But how do you connect your mind with the Atman and Brahman? Like, okay, we have listened to everything. We have listened.
Yeah.
First, we were thinking about the body. We were thinking about the mind.
Yes.
And then we have to go back and then go to the Atman level, and then to the connect our Atman to the Brahman to realize the real reality. Okay. So how do we do that? How to connect your mind with Atman and Brahman?
So I think all that Vedanta is asking you to do, in my interpretation of Vedanta, let's put it this way, right? And
Yeah.
you should listen to everybody else too, because sometimes I feel like I'm sort of maybe not understanding. But all Vedanta is asking you to do is to realize it's telling you, giving you some knowledge and asking you to see whether the knowledge is right or not, right? What you call your mind, just like any other object, exists in Brahman. It is nothing but a vritti in Brahman. So your mind is already Brahman. The problem is that in your vrittis, in your mental vrittis, there is a particular vritti which is saying, I, the mind, the vritti is saying, I'm separate from everybody else and everything else. And how that mechanism happens, why that happens, I don't know. No, nobody really knows, but that's what Vedanta is telling you. That particular vritti has taken over your life. It's a vritti which is saying, I'm Sanjay and I'm different from Mukta and Dheeraj. I have my own mind. That vritti you think that vritti you think is Satyam. Vedanta is saying, no, that's also just another vritti. Just like everything else is a vritti, this is also vritti. Just like vrittis, it's not, Vedanta is not saying that vrittis don't exist. You see a tree in front of you, that's a vritti. You see me in front of you, I'm a vritti. I exist, the tree exists. At the same level as the vritti which says, Sanjay, I'm separate. That also exists. But it is the same level, same mithya that everything else is. That's all. The actual you, which is not a you which only so you will feel, is Brahman. It's not a you like the vritti. Because that you is you also, me also, everybody else. What it's saying is that the existence of that vritti has happened because of this consciousness. So it's just trying to tell you that because it's just a vritti, it will come and go. It doesn't mean anything. It just means that it's a vritti, it will come and go. And you feel that when the vritti comes and goes, you will also come and go. But no, because that's just that what you call yourself, me, is just a vritti. What has to exist, what has always existed, will continue to exist. That existence is Brahman. That is not going to go anywhere. That will continue to exist. That's what Vedanta is telling you. Everything else you can make out from here. Now, for many people, that realization gives peace. Because you stop taking that vritti of ego very, very seriously, as if, that is all that, without it, everything is gone. So that's all there is. It's not saying you can't suddenly change. What you're trying to do is to say, I have a vritti which says I'm a mind. I now need another vritti which says I'm Brahman. Because you're saying I have to identify myself with Brahman. In that case, you will need another vritti, a new vritti, which says I'm Brahman. Remember, that is also a vritti. Anything you will say, I'm Brahman, or I'll be tomorrow I will do all this and become something else. Today I'm a body. Tomorrow I'll become stronger. I'll become mind. Then day after tomorrow I'll become even stronger and become Brahman. All those are vrittis. The name Brahman is also a vritti. So as long as you get caught in this jal of, one vritti replaced by another vritti, what do you think is a better vritti? Like Atul said, that's a fake vritti. This is a real vritti. This is a more real vritti. They're all vrittis. It's all mithya. It's not Vedanta. That's what Vedanta is actually saying. Now, it's also saying a lot of other things. It's saying how to live your life and be good and, do the right thing and all that. Good, follow that. Do it. If it's something which appeals to you, absolutely do it. But the essential kernel of Vedanta, the essential thing that it's saying, which you have to know, is this. What I just told you. This you have to know. And you can't know this by yourself, because we can't think about it like this. We are like caught in such a thing that someone from the outside is to come and tell us. And then we say, okay, let me think about it. Oh, that makes sense. That's it. So that's my understanding. That's what and actually, if you study Upanishads like Mandukya Upanishad, which is, like, it's a small Upanishad, but it focuses completely on this. It says, तो Mandukya तो सीधा कहता है कि there is no difference between the dream world and this actual world that we live in. It combines it in one term. It calls it, I forget what it's called in Sanskrit, swapna something else. So it says these two are just one, according to Gaudapada, according to Mandukya. It says, I don't see any difference between a dream and what we are living. It's the same thing. So Mandukya is very much along these lines. But of course, what I'm telling you, the way that I explained it to you, has to be unpacked like that. Because this is not exactly, those terms are not written in the Upanishads. That is the role of the person who has gone through the teaching to explain it to the next person in the teaching. That's the parampara. That's why teachers are important.
Now that we are saying Vedanta or Advaita Vedanta is experience based.
Yes.
Now, can we experience Brahman? What is the path to experiencing Brahman?
Okay, so
can it be experienced without a vritti? Two parts to the question.
Okay, right. Good question. Very important question. Okay, because it's at the base of a lot of people's sort of. So, define, when you say, can Brahman be experienced? I think what you're saying is, can I experience Brahman? Right? So, you're saying there's an I, my mind, there's a Brahman, another entity. Can I experience Brahman? Right? Now, this formulation itself is incorrect. It's not possible to experience Brahman like this, because whatever is the one who's experiencing Brahman is also Brahman. If you say, I want to experience coffee, which I'm drinking right now, I can do that because there is a me. I'm talking in Vyavaharika now, Vyavaharika plane. There is a me, there's a coffee. The two are separate things. There's the experiencer, there is the experienced, and there is the experience. There's a knower, there's the known, and there's knowledge. So knowledge can flow between the known and the knower can thus know the known. The two different things. But how can I create a Brahman which is separate from me? Because my reality, I myself, the experiencer's own reality is Brahman. So imagine, you have the ocean, like the analogy given is like there's an ocean, a sea of water, and there are waves in the ocean, right? So at the level of a wave, everything is different. There's one wave, and then there's another wave, and the two waves can interact with each other. They come to each other and they collide with each other, become one. One wave can experience another wave. You can say like this, right? It can interact with another wave. But if you see, what is the wave made of? Both of them are made out of water. How can you tell the wave, can you experience water? Can the wave experience water? Because water is what it is. Water is all there is. Every experience that a wave has is water. So if it experiences another wave, it's experiencing water, right? Wave is just a form. If it experiences three more waves, it is still experiencing water. If it doesn't experience anything at all, it is still experiencing water. So all it experiences is water. Similarly, all we experience, in every vritti, there is Brahman. There's a very nice, I've said this to you before, in Kena Upanishad, which is a very simple, nice Upanishad. There's a very nice little verse. It says, Pratibodh Viditam Matam. Pratibodh, in every bodh, in every cognition, in every experience, Viditam Matam. Know me. Know this in every experience. You don't have to think of Brahman as a separate entity which you have to experience. What you have to realize is that what you are experiencing in every little experience is Brahman itself. And Sanjay, it's possible to do that, to realize that, and that is what experience of Brahman is. Because you will suddenly start seeing things differently. It's a, what you'll start seeing, your orientation will be different to seeing every little thing that you see. That's what Krishna Bhagwan says in Gita. I am there in everything. Whatever it is, right? You don't have to ask for me and say, okay, Krishna Bhagwan, come in front of me, I want to see you. That's not. He says everything you see is because of me. You yourself are me. So what are you talking about, having? So that's the way to think about the experience of Brahman, which is how to realize the Brahman in every experience.
But Krishna Bhagwan to keh rahe hain, I am in everything.
Yes.
But how do we develop that eye to see Krishna Bhagwan in everything?
That is the eye of knowledge. It's not an eye of the senses. It's an eye of knowledge.
That I get.
That knowledge is, you're getting it.
Getting it. Yeah.
And there's, if you may have to kind of remember this. I mean, I don't know whether there's a good answer for that.
Yeah, difficult to answer all these.
Yeah.
You just have to, once you start thinking about it,
yes,
then it's, you
see, it's like this. You suddenly start thinking about it. You think, oh, it's so difficult, it's so difficult. And then suddenly one day you say, you say, what is so difficult? Like, I already am. I mean, like, what am I really striving for? It's like one of those things. It's not like a big bang.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
That's so, when in this question, like in Sanjay's question of can I experience Brahman? If instead of saying the word Brahman, you say, can I experience consciousness?
It's the same thing.
I mean, then it becomes so clear, all, right? Everything is consciousness. If without consciousness, there's everything. But
experiencing,
instead of
experiencing consciousness is not a problem. Everybody, you, me, everybody, we are working at the conscious level. Ultimately, we are working at the conscious level. Everything which we are seeing or hearing, or it is all reflected on the conscious plane. You see, I am experiencing everything. So ultimately, my conscious only is experiencing. Unless you are conscious, you cannot experience.
But and that is what I think Kiki is saying, is that consciousness is Brahman. That consciousness.
Yeah, consciousness is Brahman, but going a step backward, connecting your consciousness, your limited consciousness with the universal consciousness.
I feel what you're saying. But there is no difference between the two.
There's no difference between, but we don't feel connected. We don't really, our consciousness does not feel like we are part of the whole universe or a combined consciousness together.
But that is your mind, right? That's also consciousness. That wants
it just looks like a fragmented consciousness, not a connected consciousness.
Actually, if I had to swap out words, I would say, and modify Sanjay's question and then Nidhi's sort of variation. I would say, can you know Brahman? Can you know consciousness? In other words, instead of experience, because Dheeraj, your point is that you cannot experience. I mean, the thing that you cannot, like wave in water. So, can the wave at least get to know what it is made of?
Yes, that's exactly what we're trying to tell you. That's Vedanta's job.
Yeah.
All it's doing is telling the wave what it's made of.
Yeah.
And it's telling you.
It's about knowing Brahman as opposed to experiencing Brahman.
Absolutely. It's about knowing Brahman. And but that knowledge is not just like you have that knowledge and you file away. That knowledge makes a difference to your experience, the quality of your experience.
Sure.
right? It makes a difference to how you experience. It makes a difference to the associated vrittis which are there in experience. So, for example, when let's talk about vrittis, right? So when I experience something bad, I have associated vrittis of fear and threat and like what I call suffering, all that come when due to some vrittis, right? Some vrittis bring that in us. Other vrittis of happiness bring excitement and so on in us. When you know some certain things, those associated vrittis don't happen. So you can experience life without the associated vrittis of suffering. The associated vrittis of suffering happen because of your ignorance. Because you don't know certain things. An event has happened and that vritti leads to a bunch of other vrittis because you made assumptions along the way and you connected dots where nothing exists and all that fear and all that happens. But if you know better, then that's all there is to it. Some vrittis will not happen. So that's the impact of knowledge on a vritti level. It changes the vrittis. But yes, you cannot experience Brahman as a separate object, or consciousness as a separate object. Like even consciousness, like the moment I say I'm consciousness, I'm putting consciousness as separate from me. I am that. There's something called consciousness. Don't know exactly what it is, but I have a sense about it, and I'm that. It's a problem already. You're not that. Whatever that you're making, whatever it is that you thought is consciousness, and in your mind, that's already not you. It's like, so you can't think like that. After some time you'll give up. You'll say, no, there's no. I've got this knowledge. I can't really take it any further from the perspective of new experience. I have to embed this knowledge in my life and see what it does to my existing experience. Okay. It feels like we've spent an hour, although we haven't. Feels like Yes, Paula, you've been very quiet.
Huh?
You've been very
I
quiet.
just pay attention.
Oh, you're paying attention. Oh, good. Did you follow what all was being said? Or Paula, you have no issue with the accent and all that? You can understand us?
Yeah, just when you guys say some word in
Hindi.
Hindi that I mean, tuk tuk tuk.
You can understand what Atul says all the time.
Every time.
Every time.
Before I say it.
Yeah.
Even what he doesn't say.
Yeah.
Anyway, they say communication is like 70% visual. So
Gaby is learning some words in Hindi.
oh yeah, he'll
Yeah.
probably learn very quickly, right? He's
Chelokana, he knows.
Yeah, chalo khana.
chalo khana.
Yeah.
Oh, he
It's
loves to eat.
all
I
ready
know,
for lunch. He goes there, Chelokana. Chelo.
ठीक है. That's the other one. Okay.
He
So
knows like 3 words, and he said that he speaks Hindi.
So we won't have time to go into chapter 6 today, but I feel like I should at least talk about it a little, just introduce it. Then otherwise, just to make sure that we check the box. So if you think back to the Gita, we talked about first chapter. First chapter was what, guys? So maybe we can do this.
Preparation for the war.
Yeah. It was about the
The
war.
war was declared, and yeah, preparation for the war,
And the key
Arjun
message,
tells,
what did we learn from it as a key message? The key theme was preparation. When are you ready for knowledge? What does it take, right? The second was a summary of the knowledge. Third was Karam Yoga. Fourth was Gyan Karam Sannyas, which we all did. Fifth was Sannyas Yoga. And sixth, now we are going to talk about meditation. So that what we'll talk about next time, because he's moved into now what Dhyan Yoga is. Abhi tak to Karam Yoga tha na? So now he's kind of going into Dhyan Yoga. I think this is, from my perspective, we'll cover all of it next time. Today was pretty heavy session. So I'll leave it to you. If you want to talk about something else, fine. If you want to call it a day, whatever, it's fine with me.
I feel like I've been talking too much, but maybe I have one other thing, which is that, going back to your point, Nittu, about, when I say I am consciousness, that itself is a problem, right? Because then I and consciousness are two different entities, and, you're lost right there. But that fundamental problem is that it's the mind. When I first come to Vedanta, it's the mind that is trying to understand itself, right? And so that is where the fundamental.
So that's right. So that is why Vedanta has no option but to follow this route, where it first tells you you are not this, you are that. But every time you learn something new more, it demolishes what it first said and then goes on to the next level, right? So that is the way of doing it. So of course, when you first come, there's no other option but to say, you are not the ego, you are the consciousness, right? But then as you go along, you realize even that is inaccurate. Any expression of anything by words always has some degree of approximation to it, especially in Vedanta. So yeah, you're right. But so what? Like, it's okay.
So my question was going to be, so what, for you, for instance, how has that been transcended into your mind thinks of itself as a mind. This is a mind. This is Nittu's mind, this is Kiki's mind, this is a mind, like this is a mind in the world. Is that the orientation for you?
Yeah, because we have just like this rest of the world. So to me, that little exercise I did, the thought exercise, was very important for me, because it clarified for me that there is no way out. The only option is, there are more exercises like that. There are more things we can talk about next time if you have the appetite for it, because these are like, it has to be so. There is no other way out.
Yes. I think that's the final conviction, that it has to be so. If that conviction is not there, then maybe that's like, yeah.
No, but that conviction is going to come from reasoning and other things, or is it going to come from faith?
So everybody's different, right? That's what I've come to realize. And people have different ways in which their convictions come. I think what Vedanta has been saying is, it says there are three elements to conviction. Okay. The first is Shruti, which is around faith. You listen to the teaching because you have faith in the teaching. So you listen to what it's saying and don't discard it out of hand. So that Shraddha is very important. So that's the faith part. The second is Mananam, or logic. Shruti, Yukti, Anubhav. So Yukti is logic. That means having heard those things, do the thinking that is needed for you. Everybody has a separate level of thinking that will be needed. For you, whatever thinking is needed to make sure that there is nothing wrong in what is being said. See, you can't say that there is one Brahman, you can't derive that from logic. Logic never, even like when Einstein said space and time is 4 dimensions, he didn't derive it by logic. It's an inspiration that came to him. Once an inspiration came to him, then he used logic to see how that is true. And then he extended it using logic to come to corollaries from there. If this is so, then light would bend. And then he said, oh, yeah, light does bend. But the original thought didn't come from logic. It came because he had all these things and, it just suddenly happened. So the original thought that you are Brahman cannot come from logic. It comes from some teaching like a Vedanta. Somebody has to tell you. Someone who you have faith in has to tell you that for you to consider it seriously enough. Now, I have faith in Einstein. So when Einstein says the space is 4-dimensional or space-time is 4-dimensional, okay, I will not completely disregard it out of hand, right? That kind of thing. Or I have faith in my teachers who told me, so I didn't disregard it out of hand.
So where did Vedanta get it from?
It's who knows where it got. It may have got it from somebody. It may have got it from people who've been meditating and thinking about this a lot, just like another Einstein. There could be an Einstein in spirituality or in this kind of logical thinking or inspirations. It could have got it from there. And it made perfect sense. And because it was so sensible and it made so much sense, it became religion.
Now, what is the third one? What's the third piece?
Anubhav. The third is Anubhav. That means experience. Just like in the case of Einstein, for the world to finally believe that space-time is 4-dimensional, you had to actually see during a solar eclipse the stars moving, changing their position. That's how the world got convinced that this theory, which seems coming from a sensible guy, so there is faith, it seems logical, but you had to have the third element of it, conviction.
Yeah, but if that's the case, I think you can still make this case, reasonable case of, 3 steps or 3 ingredients without leaning on faith. Because the first one, which you sort of said is rooted in faith, can actually be rooted in curiosity.
Sure.
Yeah.
So in other words,
whatever it is that has made you attend so many sessions, in spite of saying every time, hey, I'm just auditing, and asking all these questions, whatever it is, you can call it faith, you can call it
that's my point. And I bring it up I bring it up from the point of view of that in my head.
Yeah.
In my head, things that are faith-based have a lower status.
Yeah. See, that's a wrong. That's not what Vedanta means by faith. In Vedanta's way of looking at faith, because there are so many, we have all these preconceived. In Vedanta's case, that is not what faith is meant. Chalo khana?
He's opening his pencils. Yeah. Anyway, yeah.
Okay, yeah. Anyways, yeah, so you're right. Whatever you can call that, whatever, there is some faith somewhere, some leaning somewhere in something which is making you curious. There is somewhere there is faith. You got to find out what that faith is for. I have a feeling it has to do with your dad being so fond of Vedanta. That may have been a part of it. It's given you enough motivation there to say, okay, let me just find out. But there is you can, whatever, you can define it the way you want to, but there has to be an initial
from my point of view, it's not, it's not faith-based at all. Okay. From my point of view. It's just simple curiosity, which could be rooted in my father's interest in that, but which I had not made the connection that you have just made.
Faith is defined in Vedanta as, Shraddha is defined in Vedanta as faith pending understanding. Every time you've come, you understood a little bit more, but even when you did not understand, you kept coming. That is faith. Now, why that happens or in what way, whether you recognize it as faith or not, or you call it something else, doesn't matter. But that's what is needed. What is needed is some drive which says, I'll keep coming to it till I get it, because I think there's something here. That's Shraddha. That's what is needed. Okay. Whether for many people, for me, it's Vedanta. I have this, sort of deep-rooted thing that the Indian philosophies of Vedanta are meaningful. They have value. Not only, for me, that reading the Upanishad itself directly in Sanskrit and understanding it is a driving force. I want to do that. So everybody has different, most Americans won't have that thing about Vedas. They don't care two hoots about Vedas, right? Then, like, what the hell? They don't want to replace Bible with Vedas or something like that. So there's some other faith, some other scientific curiosity, whatever it is. But whatever it is that keeps you coming and keeps you listening and keeps you absorbing, that's one step. And then reasoning is the second step. And having an actual anubhav. And anubhav will happen, is already happening, as Sanjay says. You're feeling the peace every day. You'll actually, what does Vedanta say? Vedanta says that you are not affected by, because you're Satyam at a different level, you're not affected by vrittis. You may not, you'll see evidence of that too. So that's the way to, that's the approach. It really is 10 o'clock, past 10 o'clock. I think we can safely call it a day or a night. Mukta, आपने कुछ नहीं बोला आज. I noticed.
नहीं, I was just listening. I mean, ऐसे कुछ question नहीं आया mind में, इसलिए कुछ पूछा
So
नहीं.
next time you are going to start the just
No.
next time you are going to do most of the talking.
No. What I was saying, what Atul was talking about faith and this, I would put it like this: ki I or we just start with a working faith. Ki let's listen to what is being said and what is being taught through these Upanishads, and then वही question पूछ के जो doubts है, if we like it, you continue. If you don't like it, I mean, don't have faith or belief, or it's not, you're not connecting with it. Then you slowly, I mean, many people from the group have moved out.
Yeah. True.
Everybody, many more were here for with that working faith to begin with. Because since it's written in the Upanishads and it's been there in the Vedas, and so just when we study also, whatever the books are saying, whether it's physics or chemistry, we go with faith, what the book is saying, it's right.
100% right. Absolutely. You go with the book and you go with the teacher and you go with your parents.
Teacher, yeah.
Your parents tell you something, you don't have the reasoning at that time to understand whether they are right or wrong. You have faith. Eventually.
But then if you
get older, yeah.
That's how I see it.
I totally agree.
Now, I'll add now.
No, okay. No. Yeah, meaning you didn't see it like this earlier.
Maybe.
Or are you saying that you wouldn't see it like this in the future?
No, in the beginning, I didn't see it like this. Now I see it like this.
Yes. Yeah. So that you've been brainwashed.
Over a period of time, since we started all this, there were a lot of questions, lot of queries, lot of ifs and buts, lot of logical thinking, and we won't accept so many things. But over a period of time, the angle of seeing the things, the reflection, your responses to situations, and the faith factor and the anubhav factor, everything is playing its role.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So even at the anubhav level, experience level, now initially I would say I would react to things and now from reaction to response.
Yeah.
You see, response is ठीक है यार, okay, चलने दो, okay.
Yeah. No. That's true.
So
In
you are
fact-
more at peace, and that happiness level and that contentment level, it's definitely a few notches up.
In fact, looking back, I would say that I started with curiosity. What Atul was saying, it was basic curiosity.
Yeah.
Then curiosity say was slight. It moved on to that working faith. Chalo jo whatever. I mean, we are listening to and wanting to know. So that working
नहीं,
faith
वहाँ हमारा
started,
faith
and
भी
then
बढ़ा,
these things.
इंटरेस्ट भी बढ़ा ना,
Hmm.
और कुछ
Yeah.
चीज समझ भी आई, और कुछ ऐसे लगा यार, we are going to gain out of it, we are going to learn something out of it.
Yeah.
नहीं तो साइंटिफिक
That's how it
माइंड्स
is.
को कन्विंस करना, वो करना, इट्स नॉट इजी जॉब.
Yeah. Paula, do you agree?
Yes.
I don't know whether
Everyone
she,
has a different
I wasn't
reason.
sure whether you're paying attention, so I thought let me just throw a dart at this. Chalo, yeah, let's call it a night, okay?
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Good.
Yeah, we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.